it's me, Tolga. Welcome back. This is the fourth chapter of my story, The First Days in Ankara. In this chapter, I'll share more about how my family and I struggled to adapt to life in the big city during those very first days. The first time I stepped into Ankara, I felt a wave of mixed emotions that I had never experienced before. The city's vastness struck me immediately: the towering buildings, the constant hustle and bustle, the endless streets filled with cars and people moving in every direction. The sound of honking horns, chatter, and the buzz of city life all hit me at once, creating a sensory overload. My heart raced with excitement, but at the same time, there was a knot of fear tightening in my chest. I had left behind the only life I had ever known, the only world I had ever lived in, and now here I was in a place where everything seemed so unfamiliar. The air smelled different, the people talked faster, and the streets were so crowded that it felt like I could easily get lost in the throng of strangers. We had come from a small village, a peaceful haven nestled in the mountains, far from the noise and chaos of city life. My parents had decided it was time for us to move to Ankara in search of a better future, although I didn't fully understand the reasons at the time. Life in the village had always been simple, calm, and predictable. Everyone knew each other by name, and the pace of life was slow and steady. There were no rush hours, no traffic jams, no loud, crowded shopping malls. The village was a tight-knit community where neighbors helped one another and where the rhythm of daily life revolved around the rising and setting of the sun. I had never once felt out of place because everyone had their role in the village and life was simple but fulfilling. But my mother, who had always believed deeply in the power of education and the opportunities that a bigger city could provide, saw something in Ankara that we didn't have back home. She saw a future where I could go to better schools, where there would be access to more knowledge, and where I could have a chance at a different life, a life with more options and possibilities. She often told me stories about the city, painting a picture of endless opportunities, cultural experiences, and a faster pace of life that she thought would help me grow. It was difficult to fully grasp her vision at the time because I had never wanted for anything in the village. I didn't understand why we had to leave the peace and familiarity of our village behind. I had a good life there, my friends, the open skies, the simple pleasures of walking down a dusty road or picking fruit from our backyard. But my mother, who had always been the one to make important decisions in our family, had made up her mind. With that decision came the promise of a new life, and in a flash, everything that I had ever known was left behind. Our house, our friends, and the quiet way of life that had shaped me into who I was. It felt like everything I had taken for granted was suddenly out of reach. As we made our way to our new home in Ankara, my mind was filled with questions, fears, and doubts about the future that awaited us in this bustling city. The moment we arrived in Ankara, I realized just how vast and different this new world was compared to the village I had left behind. The noise was constant, the streets were crowded, and the city's energy seemed to pulse through the very ground beneath my feet. I couldn't help but feel small in such a massive, unfamiliar place. The first day was a blur, filled with emotions I couldn't quite name. Excitement, fear, sadness, and even a sense of loss. I wanted to cling to the memories of my village, to hold on to the sense of peace and belonging I had known there, but I knew I had to move forward. My parents seemed just as overwhelmed as I was, but they didn't show it. They worked hard to settle us in and tried to reassure me that everything would be okay, even if I couldn't yet see how. That first day in Ankara, though overwhelming, marked the beginning of a new chapter for me. A chapter that would challenge me, push me to grow, and eventually help me realize that sometimes you have to leave behind what's familiar in order to discover who you're truly meant to become. The first few days in Ankara felt like an endless whirlwind, a storm of sensations and emotions that left me disoriented and out of place. I could barely keep up with the pace of the city. The streets were constantly crowded with people, all moving quickly, absorbed in their own lives, and the noise was a constant presence. The honking of car horns, the chatter of voices, and the hum of a city that never seemed to sleep. Every moment felt like a rush, and I couldn't keep up. The air, too, was thick with the smell of exhaust fumes and the sharp tang of city life. I couldn't help but yearn for the clean, fresh air of the village, where every breath felt like a gift, free from the haze of pollution that surrounded me now. My parents struggled too, though in different ways. My father, who had always been a farmer, was now trying to start a small business in this vast, unfamiliar city. He had no experience in this kind of world. He was used to working the land, to the slow, steady rhythm of life in the village. In Ankara, though, everything seemed fast-paced and impersonal. He didn't speak much about his struggles, but I could see the weight of the change on his shoulders. His usual calm demeanor had given way to a quiet anxiety, and I could sense that he was overwhelmed by the demands of the city, by the unknowns that he had to face every day. He had always been a man of the land, and now he was navigating the complicated world of business and city life. It was a far cry from the simplicity of farming, and I could see the toll it was taking on him. My mother, too, was having a difficult time adjusting. She had always been the heart of our home, the one who kept everything together, the one who made the village feel like a place of comfort and belonging. Now, in the city, she was trying to find her place in a world that felt cold and distant. She missed the village, the closeness of the people there, and the simplicity of life. She missed knowing her neighbors by name and having a deep sense of community. Here in the city, it felt like everyone was too busy to notice anyone else. I could see the loneliness in her eyes whenever she returned from her attempts to make new friends. She would smile at us, but I could tell that she was struggling with the isolation of it all. The city had a way of swallowing people whole, of making them feel insignificant, and I could see that it was doing that to her too. The city, for all its vibrancy and energy, felt like an alien world to me. It was full of life, yet it also felt incredibly isolating. There was always something happening around me, but I couldn't figure out where I fit into it all. I often found myself wandering the streets, unsure of where to go or what to do. The streets seemed to have a rhythm all their own, a fast, unyielding beat that I couldn't quite catch. The hurried footsteps of passers-by, the constant honking of taxis, the street vendors shouting to attract customers. All of it felt like noise, loud and never-ending. It was as if everyone had a purpose, a place to be, but I was just another face in the crowd, struggling to find my own way. The feeling of being lost in such a big city was overwhelming at times. It was as though the city had already set its course, its own pace, and I was desperately trying to catch up, trying to make sense of a world that moved too quickly for me to understand. It felt like the city was too big, too fast, and I was too small, too slow to keep up. Every step I took seemed to bring me farther away from the life I had known in the village, and I couldn't help but feel like an outsider in this strange new place. Despite the challenges, there were moments when I felt a flicker of hope. I had to believe that in time I would find my place here, just as my parents were slowly trying to carve out their own space in this overwhelming city. But for now, everything felt uncertain, and the struggle to adjust to this new life seemed like an endless battle against a tide I couldn't quite control. The hardest part for me, though, was school. In the village, I had grown up with the same group of friends, and our bond was unspoken yet strong. We shared everything: our laughter, our secrets, and our stories. It was easy to connect with them, to speak openly, and to be myself. There was a simplicity to those days, a familiarity that made me feel safe and understood. But here, in the city, I was just another face in a sea of strangers, and everything felt different. I didn't know how to fit in. The other kids seemed to have their own lives already, their own groups of friends that were tightly knit together. They moved through the halls with an ease I couldn't understand, laughing and chatting with one another as though they had known each other forever. I watched from the sidelines, feeling like an outsider. At lunch, I would find an empty seat in the cafeteria, hoping to blend into the background, but the loneliness was palpable. My eyes would follow the laughter and chatter of the other students, the ease with which they shared their lives with one another. They talked about things I didn't understand, about the latest movies, the songs everyone was listening to, and the fun things they had done over the weekend. All of it felt like a world that I had been dropped into, but one that I didn't belong to. It was difficult to shake the feeling of being left behind. I longed for the simplicity of the village where every conversation was familiar, every glance was comforting. Here, the city felt vast and impersonal, and I couldn't seem to find my place in it. The walls of the school seemed to close in on me, and I often felt overwhelmed by the noise, the energy, and the constant movement of the other students. I tried to speak to some of them, but the words always felt awkward, forced, and out of place. They spoke a language of their own, one I was still learning to understand. The teachers were kind, but even their kindness felt distant, like it was being filtered through a screen of professionalism. Back in the village, my teachers had been more than just educators. They were part of the community, people I knew well and who knew me in return. We shared a mutual understanding that made learning feel personal, warm, and encouraging. But here, in the city, everything felt so structured, so formal, as if there were a barrier between us. The school was much bigger than the small, familiar classrooms I was used to. The halls were crowded with students, and the lessons moved quickly, each subject slipping away before I had a chance to fully grasp it. I struggled to keep up with the pace of the lessons. The city kids were faster, sharper, and seemed to have everything figured out already. I felt like I was always a step behind, like I couldn't catch up to them. Every day, the curriculum moved forward, and I felt like I was constantly playing catch-up. The rush of city life had invaded the school, 2, and everything was done in a hurry with little time to slow down and reflect. I missed the quiet, slow-paced days back in the village when learning wasn't something to rush through. Back then, it felt like there was space to breathe, to think, and to absorb what I was learning without the pressure of keeping up with everyone else. I realized that the struggle in school wasn't just about academics, it was about feeling disconnected from the world around me. Everything from the lessons to the students felt foreign. The city was loud and fast, and I felt like I was being swept away in its current, unable to keep up. That's the end of chapter 4. Hopefully you enjoyed the story so far. If you haven't seen the other chapters yet, check them out after this video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you're enjoying the journey. Share it with a friend who might relate, and stay tuned for chapter 5. Coming soon.